Hey, gang, we made it. Welcome back to the Pop Marketing Podcast, first episode, thank God, of 2021, with an interview with a really rad guy and the frontman for Bowling for Soup, Jaret Reddick. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and most anywhere you can listen to podcasts. But for 2021, I'm going to be using Zencastr's video beta to record our interviews in the raw and then post them over to YouTube as I begin to move towards, a live stream every other week of the podcast as it's being recorded for those that would like to tune in. And more on all of that to come real soon. So kicking off 2021 with a banger of an interview with Jaret Reddick. Jaret is the frontman of the band Bowling for Soup. You may know the band from their 2002 Grammy-nominated album Drunk Enough to Dance, featuring one of my favorites from college, Girl All the Bad Guys Want, that single, or their next hit album, Hangover You Don't Deserve, featuring the radio hit 1985 that's now gone platinum all over the world. And that one's full of pop culture references. This traveling band is still at it. The guys still are out there hitting the road and even recording and streaming shows during all of quarantine. But if you want to know about Jaret Reddick, the musician, there are like 100 places on the internet and on YouTube that are going to do an extremely better job than I can ever do. So for the Pop Marketing Podcast, I'm interested in Jaret Reddick, the marketeer. Yes, he's a world-famous musician that clearly has a love and a grasp on popular culture. Just look at that 1985 video. But Jaret got a degree in marketing and psychology in college, and that combination of popular culture and business has unlocked some amazing opportunities outside of Bowling for Soup that Jaret was able to, navigate using the power of a primed pop marketing mind. He, not only wrote the theme song for Disney's Phineas and Ferb, but became a reoccurring voice actor on the cartoon as Love Handle's lead singer Danny. We talked all about this during the interview. He created Endless Possibility as the main theme of the video game Sonic Unleashed. We break this down and discuss it as an example of the work that Sega North America did to make sure Sonic remained relevant with American audiences. So the difference between Sega Japan and Sega US. He's currently the voice of E.Cheese. I can't make that up. We talk all about this as well as his pop culture themed long-running podcast and streaming show. We got Jaret Goes to the Movies and as well as Rockstar Dad Show, both awesome podcasts you should check out. I'm going to take a second here to say a huge thank you to my good friend Matt Slider, who introduced me to Jaret and got us this interview, got us connected to this awesome dude. So happy New Year, everyone. And now for my conversation with Bowling for Soup's frontman and one hell of a pop marketer, Jaret Reddick. Cool. Everybody, welcome back to the Pop Marketing Podcast. I'm Joe Cox, the pop marketer, and this is a place where we talk to creators and makers and weirdly even scholars about how people utilize the power of popular culture to fuel their careers. And today we got a very special guest. It is Jaret Reddick, frontman for Bowling for Soup, and what we're going to learn so much more than that. It's a pleasure to have you. What's up, man?
Dude, it's good to be here, man. Thanks for having me. Your setup is so pro, man. Like everything from like confirming this thing, you have to go and pick your spot, and it puts you in this. And then here we are, and your background is so cool. Good Lord.
Yeah, well, I've had a lot of time in the basement, man.
Yeah.
It's great. I got faux brick wall that my wife is like, what the hell are you doing down there?
I love that. We don't have basements in Texas, but that's one of the things that our friends that we've known for so many years, our friend that we have in common, Matt Slider, that introduced us, we were always jealous of their basements. We don't have those.
Yeah, it is rad to have basements, and it's all I know. So when I go to places that don't have it, it's kind of like the pool on the top floor or whatever, right? Like,
sure.
I'm like, where do you hang out 80% of your time? And,
Exactly.
for music, like it's all, it's all concrete. So you don't have as many neighbors complaining,
I
right?
know.
Like,
Yeah, it's just the perfect scenario.
hey, so how's quarantine and pandemic? Now I've forgotten how many days or months or whatever it is, but have you been keeping busy while not being on the road, which I'm sure is like the usual kind of,
Yeah, I
you know,
mean, I'm a bit of a workaholic anyway. I mean, my hobbies all are something that would be considered by most as work. I don't really do a lot outside of what I do, for my job or jobs, which I have many of them, and we're going to talk about that, as you said earlier. So I and my family, those are the two things that I do. I spend time with my wife and kids, and I work. So at first it was it was a bit overwhelming, and it took me a while to sort of to figure out what it was that was just really getting in my head. And I'm a new sufferer of anxiety and depression. I'm only like 8-10 years in on this, so I'm still trying to figure things out. And but I just got into this crazy funk towards the end of March, and I'm just like, what is wrong with me? And what it turned out to me and was that my calendar for 26 years of being in Bowling for Soup has always been the driving force of my life. So it's like, hey, you're gone these 2 weeks, and then you're home these 2 weeks. So here are the things that you're going to get done while you're there, and then you're gone for these 3 weeks or these 4 weeks, and it's mapped out for a year, sometimes more. And what happened to me is that, first of all, on the front end, a few things disappeared. And then on the back end, everything just was wiped clean. And I was looking at this empty calendar and waking up in the day and not really knowing what to do. I had tons of stuff I could do and needed to do, but I couldn't get anything done. And so I just threw myself into a bunch of new shit, and I didn't really need new stuff to do. But man, I started making new music, and I started doing all of these crazy shows online. I did over 100 shows online, whether it be for charity or whether it be for happy hours for people who just needed some kind of entertainment, or for my own benefit, so yeah, since then things are really nuts. I mean, I just released a new Christmas song this week with my bandmate and another band. We have a thing called Jaret and Kelly. We went and did a new Bowling for Soup record, which was absolutely not in the plan. That was just something where I was just like, I just miss you guys. We're gonna go make a new record. So that's a long answer. I'm doing great.
yeah, I mean, I'm listening to you and I was like, man, I was feeling that exact same thing, especially, I mean, I didn't know what to even say, right? Like my voice, I was like, I don't know what to even go on and talk to, because popular culture and pop marketing is, it's fun. I like to design my career around the things that I like to do. Like, like I can tell it's same with you. So
Yeah,
it took me a while to find that, right? And
yeah, you're so right. And it's
there.
Yeah, you're so right, because I do 3 podcasts as well, and that was one of first of all, that all changed because my whole studio is set up to be a podcast studio that and that's on the corners. Everybody sits in the corners, and there's mics and stuff like that. And then in the middle, it's a recording studio, and it's all one room. And so we found ourselves not being able to be in the same room on any of the shows. And then Rockstar Dad Show is a thing that we do every week, where we talk about being dads and stuff. And we found ourselves with nothing but COVID stuff to talk about. And it was like,
right,
man, this is what people are getting beat down with already. Like, we're not really offering them an outlet but such is life, I mean, it was just, because we talk about our kids so much, it was all homeschool and sports getting canceled and what these poor kids are supposed to do. And, I did the ultimate stupid thing. And we've been wanting to build a swimming pool for ever, but just we're always waiting. It's always about money, and like, man, I don't know if it's time. But it was like my children had been locked in this house for 4 or 5 months. So in August, we dug a swimming pool, and that thing is still not done. So not only has my child not had the pool that I thought we were building, which he couldn't use right now, it's winter anyway, but we haven't had a backyard, So, trying to figure out things for him to do on screens, without screens. And then there's the wife, it's like, I think both of us feel like we're punching the clock. Like we get him to bed and then we find our spot on the couch and we watch 2 hours of TV and we go to bed. It's like you just it's a little mundane, a little monotonous, and but right now things are really good and we're in a really good spot in all of those areas. We're back on the podcast. The Jaret Goes the Movies is back here. We're doing it live together, and Rockstar Dad Show. We have plenty of other things to talk about besides COVID.
Yeah, and when things open up, I'm more optimistic than ever because I really think what I've found out is like I can do all this stuff from here, and I do like my family. I'm lucky in that, right? And I think you have a 7-year-old or 8-year-old, and I'm on the same boat, and it's been really rough for her. But I've been around.
Yeah.
And I've learned a lot about Roblox, and and I stopped putting a ton of pressure on myself because I'm like, hey, I'm here, and it's just that I can't switch on and off as much like I can when I'm on the road for with client or whatever that is, right? Or going into the office. But once I've kind of like you're saying, once I'm starting to understand the technologies involved in streaming and being able to hook up with friends in different places and watching all the content you're doing. It's like, I'm looking forward to like the hybrid mix, right? Yeah. After this, to say, dude, I'll design it even more so to say, what kind of things can I do from here? And then whenever I want to go out, be able to, do that too.
Well, yeah, the ordinary fan of things is going to benefit from all this so greatly, because all of these new mediums and outlets and things that artists and marketers and that people are exploring, it's not like that's just going to go away. So it's not like we're just going to stop doing shows online or stop doing live streams. Like, that's not a thing. So you're kind of going to have the best of both worlds. I mean, you're going to have and for the artists too, it's like, okay, here's something else we can do. And, in my industry, and just entertainment in general, I mean, the revenue streams are just constantly changing now.
Yeah.
And how it works. And, I just heard yesterday that Warner Brothers is going to stream all of their movies next year, right when they release them to theaters. And so all of the big theater companies' stock just went down 15%. Well, it's like, okay, going to the movies is something we really enjoy, but we have sort of been forced to learn to watch movies here at home too. So, I think it's going to be different. I think it's going to benefit. Again, I also think this, and you hit upon this earlier. I think that people appreciate things a lot more. Now, I think we're going to be like kids, right? Like when you first get that like the whole Lego city, you're stoked about it. So we're going to have a few years of people just being like, I can't believe I can go to shows, or I can't believe I can do this or buy this or do, and then I'm sure that it'll level back out and be normal again. But man, creators have a pretty nice opportunity once people get out of their houses to show them a good time, and people are going to be ready for it once they get, once they dip their toe in and feel like they can do it and be safe.
Yeah, totally. And I want to get to these other things, but I do want to just one more. It's about access, right? Like what you were saying on that is so totally true. It's like we were so, and as marketers, like I was always, it was, what are we going to do at South by Southwest? Well, or what are we going to do at Comic-Con, right? Or what are those experiences we're going to have at those places for the people that are there? But that's like how many people, right? Like that is a very small group of people that were there. And we were always rattling the cage to be, what about the millions of people at home that want to experience that too?
Exactly.
They want to be a part of that, but they're not going to be there, right? No. So how do you bring that to them? And that's the cool part right now about what's all going on, because people actually have access to you. They wouldn't think that, but they can, they can be a part of all the stuff that you're doing. I mean,
it's a bit of a learning
right in there.
Yeah, it's a bit of a learning curve from their perspective, though, because, when we did our first Bowling for Soup live stream, you sort of go into it not knowing, okay, well, how many people are going to sit in their living room and watch this? Because here's the thing. If we went on tour for 2 weeks in the United Kingdom, we'd sell 35,000 tickets, right? If we went on tour for 6 weeks in the United States, we'd sell such and such amount of tickets. If we went to Japan for a week, Australia for 5 days, Brazil for 6, here's the amount of tickets that we would sell if we would go there. So, man, if we do a live stream, certainly people are going to trust that this is going to be awesome, and we're going to sell 100,000 tickets. Well, that's not what happened. No, it's, it is going to be a fight to convince people that it's an actual good form of entertainment. And it's up to us as artists to make it worth that too. And so I invested heavily in our first live stream, which we've only done one. And every single fan that walked away from that was like, holy shit, that was like being there. That was crazy. And, that's what we have to continually just convince. But it's almost like, right? It's like getting in the van and going out and building your following. It's like you got to convince people to get out of their house and come to the show and watch you. We just have to do that again and just be like, hey guys, we're doing this now too. And you can literally watch us from Russia, our biggest growing market right now for Bowling for Soup, oddly, is Russia. And it's like, guys, you can watch us now, every 3 or 4 months when we do a show. So, like you said, we've got to, it's up to us to get the word out there and convince them to do that. And got to get creative.
Yeah. And that's the hard work, right? That's the plumbing. That's not on stage. That's all the stuff to say, hey, it's about bringing the value to them, right? And and what's the new money model going to look like? Is it going to be the same amount for the ticket? What makes sense to them and where they're at, right?
It's important to point out that being in a band, and I think just really being anything in general, man, it's not just about writing good songs and being good. It's just not. I mean, there's so much more involved in it. And I see good examples of bands, young bands that are doing it right. And I see young bands that are like, there's no way I'm going to be able to even recoup this EP cost on my Spotify plays. And it's just like, yeah, whoever told you were going to make money selling music like that, you had the wrong guy telling you stuff. That's not a thing.
Yeah, but are more people finding you? Like, are you thinking about it right? Right? Like, are you? Your downloads are important. Like, who's playing you on Spotify is important because you're growing that base that you can then do a lot of things with, right?
Absolutely. It's like you got them listening to you now. Like, that's not your revenue stream. Your revenue stream starts now. Like, you got to get them to buy a T-shirt, or you've got to get them to come to a show. You got to get them to buy a limited edition signed CD. And I said this for many, many years. People just be like, how is it? Like, where do you guys actually make your money? And I mean, and I've always said this, my kids eat T-shirts. That's an all-encompassing word of just merch. I mean, it's like, that's how we really survive. We make a few bucks when we play shows, but the costs, if I were to list them for you, would probably make you sick, because we have crew and a bus and airplanes and hotels and a manager and 2 lawyers and a booking agent. And, it's like that pie is it's not a pie anymore, by the time you get all that down. So, again, it's all just about being in a band to me. has always just been about, the business of it. I look, Jaret on stage and Jaret with fans and things like that. That's the fun part to me. Like, that's really when I'm not even working. That's easy. Like, so the job part to me isn't playing shows. It's the other 23 and a half hours that I'm not doing that,
Yeah. And there seems to be a lot and a good transition here to the other things that you can turn that into, that fan base and whatever you've done before, and taking that energy and then moving that to other places. Because, I'd love to take the time to just talk, drunk enough to dance, hangover you don't deserve. Dude, there's very spotty times in my college career that I sort of remember that were really great.
Yeah.
And Stacy's mom, that I didn't know was a cover, but that's better than the original, is part of that. And 1985, dude, like, I was just like, look at the pop. You look at the pop culture going on inside of that, right? It's all that. It's all nostalgia, but looking at that from that 1985 perspective, which is really where pop culture and stuff started. So
Sure.
we could talk about that, and I know we'll touch on that, but there's so much rad content on there on YouTube. Like, if you want to hear about that, there's killer interviews with you talking about the details of all that. But that's not really what this podcast about. This is more looking into that stuff that goes around it, and how you have taken that career and then moved that into these other places that are close but different.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about another kind of soup, and it's like pop culture chowder today, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Sure.
Let's go through that. And I'm talking, just giving everybody a preview. It's like Phineas and Ferb and voiceover talent, Sonic Unleashed, Chuck E.Cheese. We got to discuss. Jaret Goes to the Movies, which I'm now a subscriber and on Patreon, and because I'm like, dude, I could hang out. This is it. This is my peeps. Like, this is great. I had 8 hours to Colorado that we just went to an Airbnb just to get away, and that was on, a good half the time.
Oh man, dude, thank you.
A good half time. It was great. And then like WWE and Alexa Bliss and all. There's a lot of stuff, and you keep yourself truly busy, like you said, but you've designed a career leveraging that popular culture and the fandom from your earlier success. So what about, if you wouldn't mind, can we start with Phineas and Ferb, and kind of a little bit about how that seemed to be like the transition point. How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, and that actually, there's a few things that lead into that you covered on that probably make a little bit more sense. But because the first big one for us was Jimmy Neutron, and that one kind of came out of this weird sort of left field thing, in that our record company, which was Jive, had bought Nickelodeon Records, and Nickelodeon was putting out this Jimmy Neutron movie. It was going to be huge, and quite frankly, it kind of sucks the way that it went down, because another band, Man or Astro Man, had already written a theme song for it. And they were like, hey, we want you to do this, but we want you to turn it into like a song. So like, take this 30-second theme and make it into a song. And so I did that, and that came out on the soundtrack, and it was the theme song to the movie. And, everybody was happy. Man or Astro Man ended up getting his version back on the series. So I don't think he's mad at me, which is good. I don't like people being mad. But so that one was a good one. And then we had, some other things happening in movies and TV and stuff. But so then to fast forward, Phineas and Ferb was being developed by Dan Povenmire, who was an original director and animator for The Family Guy, and Swampy Marsh, who created Rocko's Modern World, which was the Wallaby guy. Those two had worked together on The Simpsons, and apparently in The Simpsons writer room, Bowling for Soup was a band that everybody agreed upon to have playing in the background while they were in there doing stuff, which is insane. That's one of those things that you just hear and you're just, the Simpsons writers are just blaring, drunk enough to dance in there while they're playing songs. And so Yeah, man. I mean, they sought me out. They while they were pitching this to Disney, already had me in mind to do what I already did to Jimmy Neutron. They wanted me to make that. They had a theme song. They wanted me to make it into a 3-minute single and to perform it for the show. So I went into those meetings. I didn't know. I mean, so honestly, pitching for film and TV is horrible. It's just not very much fun because you do a lot of work and 99.9% of the time the show doesn't get picked up and all of that work that you did is just gone. And the way that it works is you'll pitch for a show and if you get it, you get tied to that. So you're not auditioning for anything else. It's just a really tough world out there. So I got it. I went, had the meeting and I just fell in love with these guys. And but again, while I was there, they were like, well, you did some acting, right? I was like, yeah, I was an actor as a kid. And, I love that kind of thing. I mean, that's really what I'd like to get into. And they were like, well, why don't you just audition while you're here? And so I went into the audition booth and auditioned for one part, but I ended up getting a bigger part, which is awesome because I ended up getting Danny from the band Love Handle, who was a reoccurring character who was in the first movie and all of that. And so then they would bring me. I had an open door policy. Anytime I was in LA, I could just call them and say, guys, I'm in LA. What day are y'all writing? And they'd let me come in and write a song for the movie for the show. So that one was just awesome, man. And I mean, 9 years being number one, and then they kind of went out on top, and then did a movie that I think it was supposed to be theatrically released, but ended up launching Disney Plus. That one's been just one of those where it's so Phineas and Ferb is my like if I'm at a PTA meeting and somebody's like, you look super familiar, which is my least favorite question in the world because it basically puts it on me to explain to them why they know who I am.
Yeah. And you were like, okay, where do I go? What do there could be 20. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I don't know. And so I just go, well, I don't, I play music. I'm in a band called Bowling for Soup and they're always like, Bowling for Soup. I don't know. I'm like, like 6 of my songs, you just don't know, them. Yep. I did music on Phineas and Ferb. Oh, Phineas and Ferb. So that's where I get them, where they're like, they'll leave me alone after that. Okay, well, that's neat that you do that.
That's that dad. All right. Nice.
Yeah, file him away over there. Now let's get over here to this guy that looks like a mathematician. What are you
a doctor? Yeah. What I think is killer is that Love Handle became from the song to character, right? And then became part of that story. And I love that interaction with that. Yeah. And it's epic, right? Like it's Disney and Phineas and Ferb. I had no idea until I had a 7-year-old and a bunch of 7-year-olds running around. Like it is iconic for them. And what's cool, thinking about that this week with you is there will be a time when you walk into a building and there are, kids that are way more psyched that Love Handle's in the room than they, that's how their reference is. But that's a new generation, right? For you and the fandom and growing that.
Man, I was super lucky because we our biggest hits were happening on Radio Disney around the same time that was coming out. And so there is this 18 to 25-year-old group of kids that are so into Bowling for Soup because of 1985, because of Phineas and Ferb and stuff like that. So we've had this really cool resurgence, and our genre does really well too. Still, pop punk is obviously it continues to kind of just be a thing. So yeah, man. I mean, that was it's a very important part of like our flag in the ground, so to speak. Like we've got we wrote 6 or 7 hits, and then we got Phineas and Ferb. Put that thing in the ground, like we're here to stay. And but yeah, I tell you, that whole Phineas and Ferb ride was a blast. It still is. I stay in touch with those guys, talk to them all the time. They're doing well and doing other shows and things. And we're I hopefully something happens and I get to do it again someday.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be going away anytime soon. You know how cartoons work, man. Like
Totally.
I'll still watch any Scooby Doo thing that comes out. I mean, I'll be the first in line, right? It's just bred into DNA.
Do you want to hear a funny Scooby
So
Doo story? I am a
always.
voice actor, and so I actually got the audition for the new Scooby Doo, and I actually turned it down because I was like, I don't want to be the guy who messes up Scooby Doo for a whole like 7 generations, and then like it's like this dude has just run this. I mean, I'm just like I don't want to be that guy. Like I don't
It's too
think I
much
want
pressure.
too much,
Yeah.
man. Yeah. Yeah. If they love it, it's
Yeah,
great.
it's too important in my brain. I know where we're from. Like that was my childhood. Like that's messing with icons.
Totally.
That's totally, totally. And I mean, a Fred would be great and all,
Yeah.
but take on a
Yeah.
Shaggy, man. You got a lot of. There's some competition there.
Totally agree.
Casey
What?
Kasem.
That one guy though, the dude from the scary movies, he did a
Oh,
good
dude,
job.
he's underrated, beyond underrated as
Yeah.
an actor, as in everything. I mean, Hackers, scary, like the dude who did Shaggy
Yeah.
in the real life movies, and I'm drawing a blank on his
Yeah. I can't think of his name either.
but a serial killer from Hackers. But
Yeah.
like the dude was beyond not only spot on, but kind of brought his own thing. So
He did really good. I think he did a great job.
yeah, that is a tough one. So then going into the transition to still music, man, right? Still to the bass point, but then you get into Sonic and Sega and creating for Sonic Unleashed, which is a really big AAA game at that time, and then writing not only like theme music, but like again, it's the same thing you're talking about, writing a killer song, Endless Possibility for that. Am I correct? Like for that.
Yeah, a very similar situation. They had the music to that, and it was all Japanese people that I was dealing with, and so I lucked out and happened to be going over for a festival called Punk Spring over there with Bowling for Soup, and the guy who was heading up the all of the music and stuff for the game, June was his name. And he spoke incredible English. Actually, it was really, really cool because I was you're worried when you take a meeting over there sometimes because you want to make sure that all your points are getting across and stuff. And so he came out to the show, and he already had sort of everything pitched and ready. And she's like, "What do you think? We think this game's going to do really, really well. We think you'd be the guy to write the lyrics and sing this thing." And so I was like, sure, let's do it. And so, but the music was all that electronic, and it was pretty challenging, man, to be honest. It took me a minute to get the vibe. And then once I got the vibe, it was super cool. Now, the thing about that game that is weird for today is that game was huge, but there was no real social media at the time. And I mean, nothing,
right.
So it's crazy now because
it was like game magazines, right? It was like game magazines. There was like these very few things that you watched and that you dug up if you wanted to learn about all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And so now I'll be on Instagram Live or something like that, and it just blows me away how many people are like, you got to play Endless Possibility. Play Endless Possibility. Is just like, because that's something that really until very recently you just don't ever hear that. It's but as that culture is getting tough, because again, maybe those kids that are playing that game aren't really the kind of kids that go to concerts, and so now and really that's their only tie to me anyway, right? So maybe they follow me because I did that, and now they've got the voice to be able to go, dude, you got to play that song. And I'm like, this is so weird that you want to hear that. I have never been asked to play that, but it's all the time now. It's crazy. So but yeah, and
it's super cool because once that's like an entrance ramp for you, right? Like then they get to see all the other shit that you do, right? So it's like you've created all these points for them to find not only the band, but you, right? And whether it's this podcast, like people can come in wherever they want, but there's tons of shit to look at and to listen to and to explore. And that's really what you love, when you find something you love first, you're like, oh, I love this song. Oh, you mean there's albums and shit more, and there's a podcast and there's streaming and whatever. So it's a lot about creating those in ramps, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, man. You throw as many lines in there as you can. It's like trying to be a comedian, like you go out and you to get your act together, you throw all the lines out there and you reel the ones in that bite, and that's sort of how I've built my career, to be honest.
Yeah. Try them out, see what happens. And the ones that win, do more of it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's crazy, and it makes a lot of sense. I was reading a book on that Nintendo versus Sega, back in the day, and about how nuts, like we were just kids and playing Nintendo, but there's a lot of crazy business espionage and stuff going on. But one of the big things with Sonic was they wanted to make sure it was there was a draw between Japan and America, and for marketing, and it makes perfect sense with your song. It's like they wanted it American. They wanted to say, hey, this is what's going on with youth here. So we're not going to have just your electronic duly. We're going to put our own stamp on everything. Right. Yeah. And that is pretty cool, because that's kind of living proof of that, hey, we love the game you're making in Japan, but we got to make it into something that an American kid will bite into, and relate to.
Absolutely. I have a, it's kind of like I went and saw the new Sonic movie, and I know that there's a bunch of haters out there, but I actually loved it. And I think Jim Carrey's is brilliant and everything.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And so anyway, I liked the movie. I just have this affection towards that character because I feel like, hey, I'm tied to it in some way. But yeah, man, definitely one of those things that I feel like when I start to talk about things that I've accomplished in the world, sometimes I even forget about that one. And I shouldn't. That's a huge deal.
Yeah, it's big. It's big. I mean, Sonic's the original kind of punk of that game. Everything was pretty Mario. I mean, it was Mario. It was running up against this mustachioed kind of goody two shoes guy, and they wanted somebody to kind of kick dirt in his face. It's awesome.
Yeah,
it's awesome. So then that goes from that, and we don't have to dig super deep, but I was just super surprised. What's like Chuck E.Cheese and Showbiz Pizza is such a big part of my childhood. I mean, I ran up on stage and like the whole, like I remember the robots stopped because I was bound and determined to like understand how the gorilla like say hi. But so my dreams were dashed very early when they found out they were lifeless Robotrons.
Yeah.
But like what happened with Chuck E. Cheese and becoming like the official voice of that?
So again, I think it all kind of comes back to what you said about me in the beginning of the interview. It's like, I built this band. We've been together 26 years, and the things that I've done complement it, or it complements that. And most of these things that we've talked about are offshoots in a way. It had one thing not happened, and the other probably wouldn't either. So I got into improv comedy. And I always wanted to be a stand-up comedian, but I started a band instead. So now I just do stand-up comedy during our shows. And it's nice because I have a built-in audience because all the guys laugh and they make their own jokes. But I got into improv comedy, and Chuck E. Cheese was going through they decided to change everything up about 10 years ago. And they wanted to make the mouse, like more approachable, more of a rock star, for lack of a better word. So they wanted somebody that could sing, and they wanted somebody with that had a voice that could be, that could do inflections. And then I lucked out. A place in Dallas got that account, and they, again, this is so weird. They put together a reel of like me doing interviews and me doing shows and things like that, and pitched me before I even knew what was going on. So then I get this call and it's like, hey, are you interested in this? I'm like, heck yes. I hooked my manager up. There's all this is talking. Okay, we've got you booked to come in the studio at May of whatever year that was. And so I go in and we go through the motions and we do these things and they direct me and I'm trying to come up with what he's going to sound like and how he's going to, what his laugh is going to be and stuff like that. Which now I do in my sleep. Like everything's one take now for me. Like he just comes out, but then I was really trying to figure all that out. And so I'm leaving that place and my manager calls and he goes, hey, how did the audition go? And I go, hey man, I don't think I auditioned. I think I just cut commercials. He's like, what? And I didn't even have a contract yet. In fact, I had done 3 months worth of advertising and didn't sign my contract until July. And so, that's just one of those things. And like you, man, I grew up with a showbiz in Wichita Falls, but my grandmother had Chuck E.Cheese in Lawton, and I was way more of a Chuck E.Cheese guy. I freaking loved it. And she would take, if I was there a week, I'd go 3 times, because my grandmother spoiled the shit out of me. So I just the nostalgia of that one, it's still to this day, I just can't believe that I'm him. And, through this COVID, it's been so cool because they had to recreate, okay, how are we going to get content out there? What are they going to do? So they basically took what I was already doing, live streams and stuff, and we started doing them as Chuck E. Cheese. And so I'd record it and the puppet would put it out there and things like that. And now we're doing all of these crafts and things for Christmas and, but yeah, man, it's just been a wonderful thing. That advertising agency has changed 4 times since then. So unfortunately I don't work with those same guys that saw me do improv. But
you've carried on.
I've carried on. Yeah. And now my contract is no longer, it stayed with the advertising agencies until two of them ago. Now I work directly for CEC Entertainment. And so I don't have, I don't have a learning curve, every time there's new people, I pretty much just work with the same people all the time.
But how nutty, do you know how nutty it is to have something like that or a campaign or a pitch, right? Coming from that advertising side, it's like to have that carry on through as agencies pass the torch.
Yeah.
That's killer. And to be able to now work directly with is just it's a big accomplishment.
Well, the good thing is the first Chucky was him for 20 years. And then the next guy was the same guy that did Barney. And I think he was for 15 years.
No way.
And I took that dude's job. And each time there's this uprising because there's this cult following for Chuck E. Cheese. I mean, there will be Chuck E. Cheese people that are listening to this podcast when you put it out. And they will likely comment on it, and they're awesome. But they are huge fans of that mouse. And some of them were pissed because they changed the voice, but they were always nice to me. They'd always be like, he's great. It's just, why'd you have to get rid of the other?
Just different.
And then there's people that will come to my defense, and they're like, well, because Jaret can sing the way that we do rock songs now, and But yeah, man. And when I first got it, I didn't even mention this. When I first got it with that original advertising company, they were letting me write the songs too. And that was awesome. But once they changed the first time, as you know, one company comes in and basically tries to just redo everything. So they basically the second company came in and they were like, we need to be marketing to parents. And so the mouse wasn't even in the commercials anymore. Everything was about the fact that they had chicken wings. They just sort of lost there's a few year period where it's like, what are y'all doing, man? This is a place for kids to come and their parents to sit there on their phones while their kids run around and have the best time ever. And it's cheap and the pizza's pretty damn good. It's like, this place is a win-win. You need to convince people of that. And they're back on track now. They are back on track.
Yeah. I'm a big fan and, yeah, it's a killer story. And definitely something you're always looking for that as stuff from my childhood. I get to be a part of it, right? Who would have ever thought? You back in the day would have never thought if you would, if the future you would have come back and said, you see that, you're going to be the voice. You would, your little mind would have blown.
You could have put it out on a table of like, cause as a kid, I was a drummer when I was a kid. I wanted to be Tommy Lee, I that's it. I wanted to be Tommy Lee. Like, to me, I was just like, that's the job that I want. Like, he's my favorite drummer. He's awesome. He likes to have fun. He gets hot chicks, like this. He's young. Like, I'm going to be that guy. And of course I eventually was like, no, I'm going to go to a college and get a degree in marketing and psychology. And that's what I did. The rock star stuff came later, but had you told that kid, like, actually, you're not going to be Tommy Lee, you're going to be Chuck E.Cheese, I would have just been like, what? Like, how? No, I don't even know how
does this world work?
How do you begin to even be Chuck E. Cheese? Like, what? I don't even know. I wouldn't even know how to. If you were like, hey, you need to start practicing to be Chuck E. Cheese at 13, I'm like, what? I don't know what to do. Like, I can barely throw a football.
Yeah. Yeah, same. Hey, I want to be conscious of time, but I also want to talk about the podcast because I'm addicted now. Do you have a few minutes to go into?
Absolutely, man.
Jaret Goes to the Movies?
Yeah.
So that's the big one I found out. And then I'm like, oh, I'm entering this world. There's 175 episodes. You guys started really early.
Yeah.
And it is like everything you do, it touches who you are and the music is involved. But on this one, it is more about movie reviews of movies that have already come out. And I would love to hear a little bit more about the inception of that and how that's rides has been. Because it's out weekly, right?
It is. Yeah, it is.
Recording a lot.
It's crazy the amount of work that has gone into it. So I started doing a podcast back in 2009. But I wasn't really, had I known then what I know now, I'd have one of the biggest podcasts in the world. I really would, because I got up to 10,000 subscribers really fast. But I just didn't do it. And there was no real measure of how you were doing or any of that back then. It was just, everything was just too new. So that was the Bowling for Soup one. And when I would do it, it would be great. And, but I just didn't have any commitment to it. So, my wife's best friend, my wife's dad, who is my age, by the way, his best friend, they're musicians. And, he was just like, one day he was just like, man, you got to do a podcast. I'm like, I already do one. He goes, no, you need to do a real podcast, where you sit down and somebody ropes you in and gets you to talk about one thing. Cause as you probably have learned through this thing, I can riff on anything, and I do. And often one thing leads into something else, and an hour and a half later, I'm coming back in to finish what we started talking about. But he was just like, you got it. And so my friend Rich, came up with the idea. It's like, let's do a thing called Jaret Goes to the Movies. And we started doing it. And, just two dudes sitting in a room. And then my wife, one day was in here shouting stuff from the background. We gave her a mic. And then one day my neighbor outside, Will, we were just like, hey, we're doing a podcast. Come on in. And that became the first cast, was Rich, me, my wife, and Will. We've gone through a few changes over the years. Rich is no longer on the show. He's happily married and doing his own thing. And, so season 3 just started, about 5 or 6 episodes ago. And that's really where I suggest you start, because that's what the show is now. We've got our friend Amy is on it. And then basically my new co-host, Eric, was just a dude that we met that did trivia. And I was just like, dude, you're funny. You should come be on our show. And then we've got, my wife is still on it, and Sean is our producer. But it's all centered around a movie each week, but you also get a lot of glimpses into our lives and just us going off on random stuff. And there's a lot of comedy. And like you said, we incorporate music. We do a thing called Take One, where we do a song every week that we've never rehearsed. He learns it and I learn it. But it's the first take that you're hearing on the thing. And sometimes it goes really wrong and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, man, the show, it doesn't make money hand over fist, but it supports itself. On Patreon. I'm able to pay Eric and Sean, and then keep up with sending out perks for the Patreon people and stuff like that. And it's another outlet for me. It's time that I get to spend. And that the bonus is, me and my wife during the day, sometimes during the week, are like, hey, we've got to watch this movie. Drop what you're doing. We're just going to sit down and watch a movie at 2:00 in the afternoon because we have to, and then, more time to just spend talking. And obviously I love that. So it's been a really cool ride.
Yeah, dude. And it's like, it's designed for you. Like it's to say, hey, I am just doing the stuff I really love, and you do it over and over again, and you build. I mean, like I said, it's like we're talking almost 200 episodes.
Yeah.
I'm watching it on Twitch. The streaming version is killer, so it's almost like I would rather watch it with video, and you can tune in to actually see it while it's going on, right? Yeah. My question for you too is Patreon. What do you think about fandom when you started, right? Like fandom's always been a big part of whatever you've done. And I know you understand it more than most. So what do you think about the fandom now with things like Patreon and things like streaming and live and having that contact? Is that something you really dig? Is that something you think brings a lot to the table?
Yeah, you have to get used to it. It's like, I often say this, it's like, man, I can't imagine how happy I would have been to see Nikki Sixx tweet his breakfast every day back in 1987. Like that would have been the greatest thing ever. And now if you sort of don't tweet your breakfast every day for a week, people are just like, I'm going to move on to this other guy who's tweeting his breakfast every week, And 100%. So, it's a different job. I think that, so Patreon to me is in that same realm of where Kickstarter, Pledge Music tried to go for musicians. It's essentially making the fan the label. They are supporting you to be able to create this content, and for that they get paid in more content. And so that it's similar. Our like even with our show, we call our Patreon supporters at the $20 level and up our producers. You get mentioned every single week. That's a thing. And so, but yeah, it's just like I said earlier to you, with that stuff, it's just not good enough to put out a good podcast. Like it's not good enough to just be a good songwriter and put out songs. Like you have to market yourself, and you have to have these outlets, and you have to give fans incentive to continue to pay attention to you. And, I'm certain that there's people that are happy just doing their thing and putting out music, but it's like, in order to be able to do this and have it grow and things like that, you have to learn this new world of stuff. And, man, it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work. I mean, I'm very lucky in the podcast that I have, Sean, who does all of the editing and helps me. And I know you have a guy that helps you with yours too. And, it's super helpful to do that. Whereas in like Bowling for Soup, I did so much by myself for years and years and years. And now our bass player helps me immensely these days. And so, when you've got a little help, it's definitely nice, but it's a shitload of work, man. That's for sure.
I think it's a great way to kind of send off, because you don't realize everybody wants content these days. Everybody's about, hey, make that content. Hey, get out there and why don't you start a stream up? The amount of work just to put out those pieces, right? Yeah. Like, so is way more than people expect, right? Yeah. Like not only that, but then there's the plumbing behind that, which is how are people finding you?
Yeah.
And how are you adding more to the pot? How are you making sure the people that have listened to you for a long time are feeling like they're getting love?
Yeah.
What new stuff can you add? I was just listening to one of your episodes, and it was like, my favorite is you guys have crazy ideas, and you're like, okay, let's have a FIFA tournament.
Yeah.
Let's just do a FIFA tournament. And it's like, yeah, that's it. It's just another excuse to be like, hey, come play FIFA with us.
Yeah.
We'll come kick our ass, or vice versa. But it's just another way. Just think about if you would have been able to play, FIFA with Nikki Sixx, right? Like it's
exactly
mind blowing, but it's possible now. And it is cool, but it is going to take, it's so hard to scale yourself, man. You know what I mean? That's why I appreciate so much this time today, because it is tough to scale yourself. And then you got to be like, cool, if we want to make what we want to make, we got to find ways to, it's going to take more than you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, dude, this has been awesome. I certainly appreciate it. Have me back anytime. Well, I love it. And you should come on Jaret Goes to the Movies sometime.
Killer. I would love that opportunity. I'll wait we'll find the perfect movie.
Okay.
Right? Find something super popular culture, and I'll find an excuse to get you back on. It's killer too. I didn't realize you had that marketing background. So it makes a ton of sense when you start putting it together, but it was super pleasure having you.
Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Take it easy. Have a killer weekend, man, with the fam, and looking forward to seeing what's next, brother.
Thanks, buddy.